The velvet ropes felt like a barrier as Arthur Briggs snickered, dismissing me right at the entrance. He thought I was just some dusty old relative, an uninvited ghost at the gala celebrating my family's land. They had no idea I held the true deeds, the quiet power behind every brick and blade of grass they were applauding. The surprise on their faces when the real owner stepped forward was a sight I'll never forget. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me where you're listening to this from, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You won't want to miss the ending. I stepped into the grand ballroom, the heavy oak doors swinging silently behind me as a wave of warmth, both from the crowd and the gentle heating, washed over me. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the scent of white lilies and expensive perfume, a delicate dance that tickled my nose. It was a gala, after all, and the family foundation certainly spared no expense when it came to appearances. Chandeliers, dripping with what looked like 1,000 tiny diamonds, cast a soft, golden glow across the polished marble floor. I watched as the light caught the sequins on elegant gowns and glinted off the polished shoes of the men in their tailored suits. I was dressed simply, a quiet navy dress that blended into the background, just as I intended. I wanted to be a fly on the wall, a silent observer in a room that in many ways belonged to me, even if no one here knew it. The lively chatter of hundreds of conversations buzzed around me, punctuated by the soft clinking of champagne flutes and the mellow strains of a string quartet tucked away in a corner. It was a beautiful sight, undeniably. The kind of place where dreams were spun and important connections were made. They were celebrating a big new community land development project tonight, one they were all very proud to take credit for. I just smiled to myself, a small, private smile that no one saw. I knew every archway in this old building, every pattern in the intricate ceiling plaster, every creak in the floorboards that no amount of fancy carpeting could ever quite silence. This wasn't just a venue, it was a piece of my family's legacy, bought and paid for with the very records my grandfather had kept in his dusty old ledger. The ledger they had all laughed at, the one they called worthless as they pushed me out, demanding I give up what they considered old junk. They had no idea that old junk was the key to everything. A waiter, looking quite flustered but ever so polite, weaved through the crowd with a tray of tiny, colourful appetizers. He offered me one, and I took a delicate shrimp puff, savouring the salty crunch. I found a quiet spot near a curtained window, giving me a good vantage point of the room without being directly in the spotlight. I watched the swirl of activity, the exaggerated gestures, the hearty laughs that didn't quite reach some people's eyes. It was a performance, really, and a grand one at that. I saw Arthur Briggs then, holding court near the main entrance, his laugh booming a little too loudly. He had a tight circle of important-looking people around him, all nodding earnestly at whatever grand pronouncements he was making. Arthur, always one for the spotlight, was practically preening tonight. His perfectly coiffed hair and crisp tuxedo spoke volumes of his self-importance. He was the host, the man of the hour, the one basking in all the glory for this grand community project. His eyes, sharp and always scanning for someone to impress or dismiss, flicked across the room, and then, unfortunately for me, landed directly on my quiet corner. A sneer, quick as a flash, touched his lips, and he leaned in to whisper something to the group around him. I saw their heads turn, their gazes following his, settling on me. Arthur then straightened up, a mocking smile playing on his face, and his voice, loud enough to carry just a little too far, cut through the gentle hum of conversation. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," he snickered, loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear. "Still holding on to dusty relics, I imagine? Some people just can't move forward, can they? Glad we cleared out the dead weight years ago." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear, cutting through the elegant hum of 100 polite conversations. It was as if someone had abruptly pressed a massive, invisible pause button on the entire room. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips, hushed murmurs died on tongues, and heads, discreetly at first, then more overtly, began to turn. A palpable silence, heavy and uncomfortable, settled over the grand ballroom, broken only by the faint, distant strains of the string quartet playing on, oblivious. I could feel the curious, sometimes pitying, sometimes outright judgmental stares of dozens of eyes settling on me, then quickly darting away, as if caught looking at something they shouldn't. Arthur Briggs, on the other hand, just beamed. He was clearly delighted with the effect of his little public performance, his chest puffed out even further, like a peacock showing off its feathers. A self-satisfied smirk played on his lips, and he subtly glanced at the small, important-looking group around him, who offered hesitant, forced smiles in return, unsure how to react. He wanted me to squirm, to flush with embarrassment, to perhaps even storm out. He wanted to prove his point, to underscore his dominance and my supposed insignificance. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I met his gaze, not with anger or hurt, but with a quiet, steady resolve. A gentle, almost knowing smile touched my lips, a secret only I understood. There was no point in rising to his bait, no sense in confirming his low opinion of me. He thrived on drama, on the spectacle of it all, and I had no intention of playing my part in his little play. I gave him a small, polite nod, the kind you offer to someone you barely know at a crowded event, acknowledging their presence without truly engaging. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my voice soft and even, carrying just enough to reach his circle, but not so loud as to draw any more unwanted attention. "It's quite a lovely evening." And with that, I turned slowly, my navy dress rustling, almost imperceptibly, as I did. I walked back towards my quiet spot by the curtained window, my steps unhurried and deliberate. I didn't look down or away, I simply moved with a quiet dignity, letting the stares wash over me without taking root. As I passed the elaborate dessert table, my gaze briefly met that of Helen Henderson, one of the kindest caterers I'd known, from working many of these family events over the years. She was carefully arranging tiny frosted cakes, and I caught a flicker of something in her gentle eyes, a little concern, a soft, understanding sympathy that acknowledged what had just happened without needing a single word. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a quiet gesture of recognition that warmed me from the inside out. I offered her a faint, appreciative smile in return. I reached my vantage point, picked up my glass of sparkling water, and took a slow, steady sip, the cool liquid a pleasant contrast to the warmth of the room. I watched the crowd again, as the buzzing chatter slowly, hesitantly resumed, a little louder, a little more self-conscious than before. They were all trying to pretend it hadn't happened, to smoothly resume their conversations about property values and philanthropy. I was still just an observer, but now perhaps a slightly more interesting one in their eyes. The memory of Arthur's dismissive words, "glad we cleared out the dead weight," lingered, but to me they sounded hollow, like an empty echo in a vast, echoing hall. I knew the true weight of things, and it was not something Arthur, or any of them, could ever understand, not yet. This evening, I felt, was only just beginning to truly unfold. I found myself drifting a little after Arthur's little show, letting the gentle murmur of the crowd wash over me. My smile was still there, soft and unwavering, a private thing that no one else needed to understand. I watched as Arthur continued his triumphant rounds, his laugh still a little too loud, his gestures a little too grand. He truly thought he was the master of this domain, the architect of all this success. It was almost comical, like watching a child play king on a sandcastle they didn't build themselves. But I kept that thought to myself, tucked away like a secret. I strolled casually past a towering display of white roses, their velvety petals unfurling in perfect symmetry. They smelled divine, a clean, sweet scent that cut through the heavier perfumes in the air. I paused for a moment, admiring the craftsmanship. A young woman, one of the event staff, was tidying a stray petal nearby. "These roses are simply breathtaking," I told her, my voice gentle. "Whoever arranged them has a wonderful eye." She looked up, startled, then blushed faintly, a shy smile gracing her lips. "Oh, thank you, Ma'am. I'll tell the florist. She works so hard." "I'm sure she does," I replied, offering her a warm nod. "It truly shows." It was a small exchange, easily missed in the grandeur of the evening, but it felt good to offer a genuine compliment, to acknowledge the quiet effort behind the dazzling display. I continued my slow wander, observing the ebb and flow of conversations. I saw a few faces I recognized from long ago, distant relatives who had once been part of our family gatherings, now grand dames and gentlemen of society, all caught up in the whirl. They didn't seem to recognize me, or if they did, they made no sign. I was just another face in the crowd to them, perhaps someone vaguely familiar from a forgotten past. And that was just fine by me. I noticed Helen Henderson again, bustling gracefully behind the main catering table. She was still carefully arranging pastries, her movements precise and practiced. Her hair was pulled back neatly, a few soft curls escaping around her temples, and her uniform was spotless. She had a kind face, one that smiled with her eyes, even when her lips were still. I had always admired her quiet dedication, how she treated everyone, from the most important guest to the newest busboy, with the same gentle respect. As I drew a little closer, admiring a tray of miniature lemon tarts, Helen looked up. Her eyes met mine, and that soft, understanding sympathy flickered again. But this time, it wasn't just sympathy. It was a warmth, an unspoken kindness that felt like a quiet hug. She straightened up, a gentle smile spreading across her face. "Welcome, dear," she said, her voice soft and melodious, like a little tune. She reached for a freshly baked pastry, golden brown and smelling of cinnamon, placing it delicately on a small plate. Then she poured a glass of sparkling water, the tiny bubbles dancing to the brim. "It's lovely to see a new face, or a familiar one, enjoying the evening." She extended the plate and glass towards me. "Please, do have this. It's fresh out of the oven." I took the plate and glass, feeling the warmth of the pastry through the porcelain. Her kindness, so simple and unassuming, was like a balm after the chill of Arthur's words. She saw me just as a guest, a person, not a judgment or a dusty relic. "Thank you, Helen," I replied, my voice holding a sincerity that went deeper than just gratitude for the treat. "That is so very thoughtful of you. It smells absolutely wonderful." She just smiled, that lovely, genuine smile, as if she truly meant every word. "My pleasure, dear. Enjoy the evening." She turned back to her work, humming a quiet tune under her breath, completely unaware that her simple kindness had reached me so profoundly, or that the person she was serving held the keys to this entire grand affair. The warmth of Helen's pastry still lingered in my hand, a small, sweet comfort against the cool glass of sparkling water. Her genuine kindness was a refreshing breeze in a room that sometimes felt stifling with its unspoken rules and judgments. I watched as Arthur Briggs, like a shark sensing blood in the water, spotted me still lingering near the catering table. His self-satisfied grin from earlier had curdled into a frown, a distinct furrow appearing between his perfectly shaped eyebrows. He probably expected me to have scurried away by now, to have understood his very clear, very loud message. But I wasn't just any guest, and I certainly wasn't a guest who would be easily dismissed. He watched me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, the silent accusations forming. Who does she think she is? Still here? After what I said? I just took another sip of my water, my gaze serene, almost challenging in its quiet calm. His face, usually so composed in its arrogance, started to flush a faint, angry red. He barked something to a tall, burly man in a dark suit standing near the main entrance, one of the event's security personnel. The man nodded, his expression unreadable, and began to make his way towards me, weaving through the chattering crowd with an air of quiet purpose. Heads turned slightly as he passed, a ripple of curiosity spreading through the elegant gathering. I felt a prickle of anticipation, a tightening in my chest that wasn't fear, but something sharper, more exhilarating. This was it then. Arthur truly believed he could simply erase me. The security guard, a polite but firm-looking man, reached me. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low, a professional whisper that still carried a hint of authority. "Mr. Briggs has asked me to assist you to the exit." He gestured vaguely towards the main doors, his eyes avoiding mine directly, clearly uncomfortable with the task. A few nearby conversations died down completely. I could feel their eyes on me again, a silent chorus of judgment and morbid curiosity. Arthur, still watching, allowed a triumphant smirk to spread across his face. He even raised his chin slightly as if daring me to protest, to make a scene that would confirm his earlier pronouncements about dead weight. He wanted everyone to see my public humiliation, to cement his narrative of my insignificance. I looked at the security guard, then back at Arthur, who was now practically glowing with self-importance. "Assist me to the exit?" I asked, my voice calm, almost amused. "Did Mr. Briggs mention why I might need assistance?" The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Just that your presence is no longer desired, ma'am." He looked truly apologetic, just doing his job. "I see," I murmured, taking a final bite of Helen's wonderful pastry. The cinnamon was a little kick of defiance. "Very well." I placed the empty plate and glass on a passing waiter's tray, my movements slow and deliberate. Arthur's smirk widened. He probably thought I was meekly conceding. He probably thought I was finally retreating, just as he had always wanted. He was so busy basking in his petty victory that he missed the slight glint in my eye, the quiet resolve that had settled deep within me. The security guard, relieved, offered a small, polite bow of his head and turned, indicating I should follow him towards the grand entrance. I walked beside him, my back straight, my gaze steady. I didn't look at the faces of the guests as they parted for us, but I could feel their stares, their whispered conjectures. I could practically hear the gossip that would fly around the room for the rest of the night. This was a public spectacle, exactly what Arthur wanted, and he was getting it. We walked past the towering rose display, past the shimmering chandeliers, past the hushed conversations that sprang back to life like whispers behind our backs. The heavy oak doors, the ones I had entered through so quietly, loomed ahead. The guard reached out to push one open. I watched his hand, the polished wood of the door, the small sliver of the brightly lit foyer beyond. And then, just as his hand touched the doorknob, I stopped. I didn't move another inch. My feet, planted firmly on the polished marble, felt as solid as the foundation beneath this very building. The guard paused, surprised, turning to look at me with a questioning glance. Arthur Briggs from across the room looked up, his triumphant smile faltering. He still had no idea what was truly about to happen. My feet, planted firmly on the polished marble, felt as solid as the foundation beneath this very building. The guard paused, surprised, turning to look at me with a questioning glance. Arthur Briggs from across the room looked up, his triumphant smile faltering, a flicker of irritation crossing his face that I hadn't meekly followed orders. He was about to stomp over himself, I could tell, to personally oversee my removal, to make an even bigger show of it. The silence in that part of the ballroom had grown heavy, a thick, expectant hush, all eyes fixed on me, waiting to see what I would do. Just then, as if on cue, the grand oak doors to the foyer, the very ones the guard was about to open for my exit, swung inward with a quiet whoosh. All heads, including Arthur's, whipped around. A tall, distinguished gentleman stepped into the ballroom. He had a shock of silver hair, impeccably styled, and his suit was tailored to perfection, exuding an air of quiet authority. This was Harold McAllister, my longtime business partner, a man whose word carried immense weight in every circle that truly mattered. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes sweep over the opulent room. He didn't seem to notice the sudden, hushed attention or the tension that had gathered. His gaze, calm and steady, quickly found mine across the room. A genuine, broad smile lit up his face, a warmth I knew well, and he immediately, without a moment's hesitation, began to stride directly towards me. He didn't glance at Arthur, who was now standing utterly frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his triumphant smirk entirely wiped away. Harold simply moved, a beacon of purpose, straight to my side. The security guard, who had been about to escort me out, looked completely baffled. He took a small step back, his hand dropping from the doorknob, his eyes darting between me and the arriving VIP. His confusion was mirrored on many faces around the room. Whispers, tentative at first, began to ripple through the crowd like little waves. Everyone was trying to figure out what was happening, why this very important man was making a beeline for the woman Arthur Briggs had just publicly dismissed. Harold reached me, his eyes sparkling with a familiar kindness. He didn't just offer a polite handshake. He took my hand warmly in both of his, a gesture of deep respect and genuine affection. His grip was firm, reassuring, a silent promise of support. And since you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this. He squeezed my hand gently, his voice clear and resonant, carrying easily through the now almost complete silence of the room. Dorothy, my dear, I'm so glad you could make it. We couldn't have pulled this off without you. The final details of the acquisition were just confirmed, thanks to your incredible foresight. My smile, which had been a private secret all evening, now felt completely open, genuine, and just a little bit mischievous. I looked at Harold, then, almost imperceptibly, passed his shoulder towards Arthur Briggs. Arthur was utterly speechless, his face a mask of disbelief. The triumphant flush that had coloured his cheeks had drained away, leaving him pale, almost green. He blinked, swallowed hard, and looked around as if searching for an explanation, for someone to contradict what he had just heard. Harold's words, "We couldn't have pulled this off without you," hung in the air, a bell tolling the truth that Arthur had desperately tried to bury. The entire room seemed to recalibrate. The quiet whispers stopped, replaced by a profound, almost stunned silence. Heads turned not to me with pity or judgment, but to Arthur with confusion and dawning understanding. The atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted entirely from one of social judgment to one of sudden, shocking revelation. They thought they knew me, thought I was just dead weight. But Harold's arrival had just pulled back the curtain, revealing a truth far grander than any of them had imagined, and the evening had only just begun to truly unfold. The silence that followed Harold's words was profound, a vacuum in the buzzing ballroom. Arthur Briggs stood utterly motionless, his face now completely devoid of colour, like a marble statue carved mid-gasp. His eyes, usually so quick and calculating, darted frantically between Harold, me, and then the stunned faces of the people who had been hanging on his every word just moments ago. The security guard, who had been about to escort me out, looked like a deer caught in headlights, unsure whether to salute, apologize, or simply vanish into thin air. Harold, still holding my hand, turned to me with a reassuring squeeze. "Dorothy, it's all in order. The last parcel was secured this morning. The Foundation will be able to proceed with the entire community project, just as you envisioned." He spoke with such quiet confidence, such respect, that there was no mistaking the true source of power in that conversation. I smiled at Harold, a genuine, grateful smile. "Thank you, Harold. You've been an absolute rock through all of it." Then, very slowly, I turned my gaze back to Arthur Briggs. He was still standing there, fixed in place, but a faint tremor had started to run through him. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling, piece by agonizing piece, before everyone's eyes. "Arthur," I said, my voice soft but clear enough to carry in the sudden stillness. "You were right in a way about moving forward. It does take vision. And sometimes," I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the beautiful decor. "That vision comes from places people might consider old or dusty, things they've dismissed as dead weight." I met his eyes again, and they were wide with a dawning, terrible comprehension. "This lovely gala tonight," I continued, my tone still warm, almost conversational, as if I were simply explaining a point of etiquette. "It truly is a magnificent celebration of what we can achieve for the community. And I am so pleased that the Family Foundation has been able to make such a significant impact." I glanced around the room, making eye contact with a few of the more prominent guests who were now looking at me with entirely new expressions. "You see, this entire project, the one we're all so proud of this evening, has been a passion project of mine for many years. It's a wonderful use for the land, much of which has been in my family for generations. Land that, thanks to careful management and long-term planning, I've quietly consolidated ownership of over time." I paused, letting that sink in. I could see the puzzle pieces clicking into place in Arthur's mind, and in the minds of the other guests. The elegant venue itself, the family foundation he so proudly led, the community land development project he was taking all the credit for, they were all, in truth, connected back to me, the woman he had just publicly scorned. "As the substantial owner of these properties," I continued, keeping my voice gentle, "and indeed as the primary benefactor and major donor to the foundation itself, I've had the distinct pleasure of funding this wonderful initiative. It's been a quiet endeavor for a long time, but one I'm deeply proud of." I looked directly at Arthur, whose face had gone from pale to a faint, sickly green. His mouth opened, then closed. He tried to speak, but no sound emerged. It was as if his throat had simply decided to stop working, perhaps out of sheer shock, perhaps out of an overwhelming sense of dread. "I do hope everyone enjoys the evening," I concluded, turning back to Harold with a sweet, serene smile. "It's quite a beautiful celebration, isn't it?" Harold simply nodded, his eyes twinkling. Arthur Briggs, the self-proclaimed king of the gala, the man who had just publicly ridiculed me, stood frozen in the middle of the room, completely speechless. The words he had tried to find simply wouldn't come. The silence in the room stretched, taut and thick, like a velvet ribbon pulled too tight. Arthur Briggs was still frozen, a living statue carved from disbelief, his face a pale canvas of shock, His eyes, usually so arrogant, now looked bewildered, darting about as if searching for an escape route, for someone to contradict this impossible turn of events, but no one did. Instead, the whispers began, a delicate rustling sound at first, like dry leaves skittering across a polished floor. Then they grew, gaining confidence, turning into a low, buzzing hum that vibrated through the elegant space. I watched as heads turned, not with pity for me anymore, but with a dawning, almost uncomfortable realization for Arthur. The very people who had been nodding along with his grand pronouncements now exchanged furtive glances, their smiles uncertain, their eyes wide with revelation. A woman in a shimmering gown, who had been leaning intimately into Arthur's circle just moments ago, suddenly discovered a fascinating pattern on the ceiling. Another gentleman, who had been laughing a little too loudly at Arthur's earlier jab, began to slowly, subtly inch his gilded chair away from the group, pretending to admire a nearby painting. The air crackled with the unspoken truth, and loyalties, once seemingly rock solid, began to shift and dissolve like sugar in hot tea. I remained completely composed, a soft, unwavering smile still gracing my lips. Harold, ever the steady presence, gave my hand another gentle squeeze. "A truly remarkable vision, Dorothy," he murmured, his voice low enough for just us, yet firm with conviction. "You always knew the long game." "Some things just take time, Harold," I replied, my gaze sweeping across the ballroom. The string quartet, bless their hearts, seemed to have sensed the shift and had begun playing a brighter, more hopeful tune. The change was almost immediate, the mood lightening, a collective exhale rippling through the crowd. No longer were they looking at Arthur with deference, but with a mixture of curiosity, embarrassment, and a hint of something else entirely, a newfound respect for the quiet woman in the navy dress. Arthur finally found his voice, a strangled, almost pathetic croak. "Dorothy, what are you saying?" His attempt to regain control was feeble, his usual bluster completely gone. He looked less like the powerful host and more like a deflated balloon, all the hot air suddenly released. I simply offered him a gentle, sympathetic smile. There was no need for further explanation. The truth had already settled in the room like a heavy cloak. Everyone understood now. The dusty relics had proven to be the very foundation of their grand celebration. The dead weight was, in fact, the anchor. I saw Helen Henderson, the kind caterer, peeking out from behind her dessert table. Her eyes met mine, and she gave me a small, knowing nod, a silent cheer of support. Her genuine kindness earlier had been a balm, and now her quiet recognition was a warm affirmation. The circle around Arthur had completely dissipated now, leaving him standing awkwardly alone in the middle of the ballroom, a solitary figure amidst the suddenly reanimated chatter. The few brave souls who had stayed close to him earlier now found pressing reasons to drift towards the champagne bar or the buffet. I took a deep breath, letting the moment hang, letting the full weight of the revelation settle on every single person in the room. Then I gently withdrew my hand from Harold's, feeling a quiet strength emanating from within me. I took a small step forward, my gaze sweeping across all the faces, meeting their eyes with warmth and confidence. The room quieted once more, anticipation thrumming in the air. "I believe we have much to celebrate tonight, and I hope we can all do so with open hearts." "I believe we have much to celebrate tonight, and I hope we can all do so with open hearts." With that, I gave the room another warm smile, letting my gaze linger on the now very quiet figure of Arthur Briggs. He looked like he was glued to the spot, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, disbelief, anger, and a truly profound, sickening shame. The buzz of conversation was starting to pick up again, but it was a different kind of buzz, laden with a new understanding, a quiet re-evaluation of everything they thought they knew. Harold, ever so perceptive, immediately understood. He leaned in just a little, his voice a low rumble meant only for me. "Dorothy, shall I speak with the Foundation's interim director? I believe there are a few adjustments to be made to their current arrangements." I nodded, my smile unwavering. "I think that would be very wise, Harold. This project, and the Foundation itself, relies on integrity and a shared vision. We need to ensure that the leadership truly reflects those values going forward. It wasn't about revenge, you see, but about setting things right. The ledger, with all its quiet truths, had always been about proper stewardship, about honoring the legacy, not just claiming the glory." Harold gave my arm a gentle pat. "Consider it done, my dear." He then excused himself with a polite nod, smoothly moving away from my side and towards a discreet corner of the room where a serious-looking woman in a navy suit was engaged in conversation. She was Ms. Albright, the Foundation's very capable, if somewhat overwhelmed, interim director. I watched as Harold approached her, his posture authoritative, yet reassuring. Their conversation was brief, hushed, and to the point. I didn't need to hear the words, I knew the message being conveyed. Meanwhile, Arthur, having found no friendly faces to retreat to, seemed to shrink further into himself. He tried to straighten his shoulders, to recapture some semblance of his former arrogance, but it was a hollow gesture. His eyes darted about, meeting no one's gaze, finding no solace. I could almost feel the weight of his unraveling, the public humiliation burning through his carefully constructed image. In a surprisingly short time, Ms. Albright, looking even more serious but now with a determined glint in her eye, approached Arthur. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She simply walked up to him, extended a discreet hand, and spoke in a low, professional tone. I couldn't hear her words, but I saw Arthur's face crumple. He shook his head slightly as if in denial, then nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. He looked utterly defeated, all the air completely knocked out of him. Ms. Albright then offered him a small, curt nod, turned, and walked away, leaving Arthur standing there, alone once more. He looked around the room, a desperate, almost pleading look in his eyes. But the guests, once his eager audience, now avoided his gaze. Their conversations seemed to swell around him, isolating him in a bubble of his own making. He tried to catch someone's eye, anyone's, but they simply turned away, pretended to not see him, their polite smiles barely concealing their discomfort. I watched him. He took a hesitant step, then another, moving slowly towards the grand oak doors that I had almost been escorted through just minutes before. His stride, once so confident and booming, was now a mere shuffle. His head was bowed, his perfectly coiffed hair no longer looking triumphant, but simply messy. He didn't look at me, not even once. He just kept moving, a ghost of his former self, heading for the exit. The security guard, the one who had been ready to show me out, was now subtly holding the main door open for Arthur, his face a picture of quiet apology and a clear understanding of the shifting tides. Arthur didn't acknowledge him. He simply walked through, a figure of profound shame and public disgrace, disappearing from the opulent ballroom as silently as he had once demanded my own departure. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind him with a soft thud, a quiet punctuation mark on a very loud night. The air in the room seemed to lighten instantly, almost imperceptibly, as if a great weight had been lifted. Justice, I thought, can be so elegantly quiet sometimes. The heavy oak doors had closed behind Arthur, taking with them the last vestiges of his bluster. The room seemed to sigh, a collective, almost audible release of tension. Conversations, which had been strained and hushed moments before, now picked up with a lighter, more genuine energy. Guests began to move freely again, their shoulders relaxed, their smiles less forced. It was as if a dark cloud had drifted away, leaving only sunshine. I watched Harold McAllister across the room, still deep in conversation with Ms. Albright. I could tell from their animated gestures and the occasional nod that my quiet instructions were being put into action. My foundation, would soon be steered by hands that genuinely cared for its purpose, not just its prestige. I took a moment, letting the warmth of the renewed atmosphere wash over me. It felt good, deeply good, to see justice served with such quiet dignity. No shouting, no grand theatrics, just a simple unveiling of truth that made the arrogant facade crumble on its own. It was exactly as I had planned years ago when I first started piecing together the old ledger's secrets. My gaze then drifted towards the catering area. Helen Henderson was still there, meticulously arranging fresh fruit tarts onto a tiered stand. She looked a little tired, perhaps, but there was a serene grace in her movements. I saw her glance my way, and when our eyes met, she offered me a small, genuine smile, a smile of shared understanding, unburdened by judgment or expectation. That little moment, amidst all the grand revelations, felt like the most important one. I walked towards her, my simple navy dress feeling perfectly appropriate now. The scent of warm pastry still lingered in the air around her station, a comforting aroma. "Helen?" I said, my voice soft as I approached. "Thank you again for the pastry earlier. It was truly lovely and so very thoughtful." She looked up, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "Oh, it was my pleasure, dear. Just a little something. You looked like you needed a friendly face." She wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes twinkling. "Quite a night, isn't it?" I smiled. "Indeed, it has been. A very revealing one, wouldn't you say?" Helen chuckled softly. "Some revelations are certainly overdue, if you ask me." She then leaned in a little, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper. "You know, dear, I always admired your grandfather. He had a good heart. Said this land was for the people, always." Her words warmed me right down to my toes. It was a reminder of why I had done all of this, why I had clung to that old ledger and worked so tirelessly in the shadows. "He certainly did, Helen. And that's a legacy I intend to honor. More than ever." I paused, looking at her kind, honest face. Her gentle spirit, her unwavering dedication to quietly serving others, had always impressed me. She was exactly the kind of person who truly understood the heart of community. "Helen," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I'm embarking on a rather significant expansion of the community initiatives I support through the foundation. We'll be creating new programs, new spaces, and expanding our outreach to ensure everyone in this area has access to good food, education, and opportunities." Her eyes widened slightly, a genuine spark of interest there. "That sounds wonderful, dear, truly wonderful." "It is," I agreed. "And for these new initiatives, I need someone truly special. Someone with a kind heart, a sharp mind for organization, and a genuine passion for people. Someone who knows how to make everyone feel welcome, no matter their background. Someone who sees people, truly sees them, and treats them with dignity, just as you did for me tonight." I met her gaze, letting the sincerity of my words shine through. "Helen, I'd like to offer you a position, not just as a caterer, though your food is delightful. I'd like you to oversee the community outreach and engagement for the new programs. It would be a stable role with a proper salary, benefits, and a chance to truly make a difference in people's lives, far beyond just serving them a meal." Helen stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across her face. Her eyes, usually so calm, now shone with a mixture of shock and dawning hope. She shook her head faintly as if to clear it. Me? Oh, Dorothy, I don't know what to say. I'm just a caterer. You are much more than just a caterer, Helen, I said, taking her hand gently. You are the heart of service, and that is precisely what this foundation needs. Will you consider it? She looked down at our clasped hands, then back at me, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, quickly wiped away. Consider it? Dorothy, I would be honored. It would be a dream come true. Her voice was soft, thick with emotion. I squeezed her hand again, my heart feeling full. The dust from my grandfather's ledger had finally settled, bringing with it not just justice, but a quiet, hopeful future for someone truly deserving. Helen's face was a mixture of wonder and relief, her eyes welling up with a joy that truly touched my heart. "Thank you, Dorothy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I promise I'll do my very best. It truly means the world to me." "I know you will, Helen," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. "And you, my dear, will mean the world to our community. Welcome aboard." It was a quiet triumph, a personal victory that felt even sweeter than Arthur's public unraveling. This wasn't about power or show. It was about truly helping someone deserving, someone who embodied the very values this foundation was meant to uphold. I took one last sip of my sparkling water, the tiny bubbles dancing on my tongue, and then placed the glass on Helen's tray. She gave me a radiant smile, already looking a little less tired, a little more hopeful. It was a good feeling, the kind that settles deep in your bones and makes you smile from the inside out. I then allowed myself to take a slow, deliberate look around the ballroom. The atmosphere had completely transformed. The stiff formality had evaporated, replaced by a genuine warmth. Groups of people were laughing, conversing with ease, unburdened by the tension Arthur had cast over the evening. I saw Harold across the room, giving me a discreet, almost imperceptible nod. He had finished his conversation with Miss Albright, and from the firm set of her jaw and the professional air with which she was now observing the room, I knew the adjustments were well underway. The foundation, my family's legacy, was being safely handed back into capable, ethical hands. No one looked at me with pity or dismissal anymore. Instead, I noticed a few polite nods, some curious glances, and even a couple of hesitant, respectful smiles. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. The woman who had been publicly scorned and almost shown the door was now seen for what she truly was. The quiet force, the substantial owner, the reason the entire gala was even happening, the very heartbeat of the properties they were celebrating. The grand chandeliers still sparkling above, the polished marble floor, the carefully arranged flowers, the delicious food, and even the melodic strains of the string quartet. They were all here because of what Arthur Briggs had called dusty relics and dead weight. I smiled to myself, a profound, private sense of satisfaction filling me. I didn't need a grand exit, no final dramatic statement. My presence and Harold's words had already spoken volumes. I simply gave a last warm nod to Helen, who was beaming at me, and then began to walk towards the main oak doors. I moved with the same quiet purpose I had entered with, but now every step felt lighter, imbued with a quiet dignity that had been earned, not demanded. I didn't rush, didn't try to catch anyone's eye, but simply moved with a serene confidence. The security guard, the one who had been ready to usher me out, was now standing respectfully by the doors, holding one open for me. He gave a slight bow of his head as I passed, his face etched with a clear understanding that his earlier instructions had been a grave mistake. I stepped out into the quieter foyer, the hum of the ballroom fading softly behind me. The cool night air outside felt crisp and clean after the warmth of the gala. As I walked towards the waiting car, I thought about the dusty old ledger. It had cost me years of quiet work, of biting my tongue, of allowing others to take credit, even enduring their sneers. It had cost me the immediate recognition, the public praise, the easy path. But what it proved was invaluable, that true power isn't in loud pronouncements or flashy displays, but in quiet dedication, in steadfast integrity, and in the unwavering belief that justice, when nurtured and given time, will always find its way to the light. It proved that sometimes the most profound victories are won not with a shout, but with a knowing smile and a gentle, purposeful walk towards the future. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.